TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, and my experience with it. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, I'm not an expert in the field, but I do have personal experience with this and how it relates to addiction and recovery. A lot of guys these days are really focused on getting bigger, getting stronger, looking better. I think that there's a place for it, but so here, let me tell you my experience with it. I had a friend that had been trying these things called SARMs, and SARMs stands for Selective Androgen Receptor Modulators. I'm basically going to talk about steroids, essentially, performance-enhancing drugs, and sort of my experience with that. So I had a buddy, he was talking about these SARMs, they call them. Basically what it is it comes in, it's basically a way to avoid needles with steroids, essentially. You might hear of a lot of these, young kids at the gym doing them nowadays. It comes in a liquid, and you take a drop of a certain amount, and what it does is it promotes muscle and bone growth. There's a lot of side effects to it, like lowering your testosterone. So I had a buddy tell me how he was doing with them. He loved it, he was enjoying it, he was looking good, he was feeling good, and I could notice the difference too. So I was in recovery at the time, about 6 years sober, and I was interested, I was intrigued. I want to get bigger, I want to look good. My ego loves that. So I started looking them up, and if you're anything like me, you go all in with research and obsessing over things to the point where you become an expert. And so I became an expert in the field of performance enhancing drugs because I was super interested in it and I wanted to look good, like I said. I found that it technically wasn't a mood, mind altering substance, which I loved because that would mean I wouldn't have relapsed, and it wouldn't be a relapse. I was justifying it in my head. These are all the thoughts that were going on in my head at the time. I now understand that it's a very slippery slope for me. So I tried these SARMs, and the more I researched about them, the more, Reddit forums, bodybuilding forums, people were constantly saying, don't do SARMs, they're really bad for you. There's a lot of side effects. It lowers your testosterone. Don't be a pussy and just start pinning, and they call it, right? Putting a needle in your muscle and get on testosterone. And so a lot of these guys were saying that you needed to be on some kind of testosterone base to do the SARMs. And then I'm thinking, well, what's the point of doing the SARMs? I might as well do the steroids all out. So I found some forums online. I started shopping for testosterone, and in my mind at the time, the most important thing was that I do it without relapsing, like I said. So I would justify it in a way where if I could get a prescription, there was this TRT thing that a lot of people were talking about, testosterone replacement therapy. If I could get a prescription, then, it would be okay. I wouldn't be using illegally. I wouldn't be buying steroids illegally. In Canada, weirdly enough, and this doesn't really make sense to me, it's illegal to sell and distribute steroids, performance enhancing drugs, testosterone, Primobolan, but it's not illegal to possess them. I was excited about that because I wasn't really technically breaking the law, and so I would buy it online and get shipped to my house, and I was away. I tried it out. I remember the first needle I put, I used 1.5 inches, which I now know is way too much, and I completely missed the spot. I almost hit my lower back. You do it in like the side area, I was doing it in the side area. Ventrogluteal. That was the spot. It was right above, right below the hip bone. And I remember I put a 1.5 inch needle right in there all the way. And I felt like I paralyzed myself. It was so painful. And it hurt for days after. I made a lot of mistakes in the beginning, suffice to say. When you inject testosterone, and you do too much, naturally your estrogen levels go up too. And high estrogen levels are bad, low estrogen levels are bad, so you want to be right in the range. And I remember my estrogen levels were really high, and I would break out in pimples all over my back. That's why you see a lot of these steroid guys have a lot of acne, back knee they call it, acne on your back, and it was out of control. So I was running a marathon at the time too, and I remember I gained like 10 pounds, and it was like the hardest marathon I've ever done because I was so overweight. So I got into the TRT, it was great, and then I figured to myself, well, if I'm already doing testosterone, and this is where the addiction part plays in for me, I'm already, the efforts they call it, right? The efforts, they come in. I'm already doing this, so I might as well go a level up. And so I got into full cycles of steroids, when what that means is, you're doing 3-5 times the amount of TRT. If TRT is 150 milligrams, give or take, that's kind of the max that they prescribe in Canada per week, 150 milligrams per week. a steroid cycle starts at 300 and goes up to anywhere to 1,000, 1,500 milligrams. I heard some guys doing, which is insane. I don't know how they got away with that. But then this whole other host of problems comes in, where you're taking other drugs to lower your estrogen and keep it in range, and it was just a nightmare. So essentially that led to my relapse, which the relapse was originally on ADHD medication, because now I had been doing this. I'd seen the Adderall online, and I said to myself, I remember saying to myself, I'm never going to buy that, right? But then, inevitably ended up buying it one day, and I've come to realize that every relapse in my life is some kind of part missing, like a hole that I haven't filled spiritually or internally, and I'm looking for external things to fix my internal. So as a result of my steroid use, I'm still on TRT to this day, because once you can't really get off of it properly, and I've just been I don't think I want to give it up, because I'm scared of the repercussions, right? Losing all your muscle, fatigue, a lot of side effects. It is possible, and I do hope to one day get there, but it's tough, right? You get so used to this body, this form, and it's tough to give it up. So I've tried every steroid there pretty much is. The worst one being trenbolone. Trenbolone enanthate is scary steroid. It's basically a cow steroid, I'm pretty sure, and they give it to cows. The side effects on that one were crazy, right? These dark thoughts, depression, lack of sleep, sweating in your sleep, just horrible side effects. And but it is considered the strongest one. I remember throwing weights at the gym, essentially, like just being so on top of the world at times. And it's funny, the things we do to, the things I sacrifice in order to get some gain. It's just hilarious. And then today, it's hard for me to go to a recovery meeting sometimes because I'm too lazy or I'm too comfortable. It's just funny how the brain works. At the same token, this is a common theme with me. I would trick doctors essentially into giving me a prescription. So I manipulated my testosterone tests, took it late in the afternoon. I had been run down, so my testosterone was low enough where I could get a prescription. And I had seen some doctor online, and he gave me a prescription for the rub at first, the cream, they call it. It's cream. And I managed to get from another doctor, I made up some excuse. I didn't want the cream getting on my wife or, people around me, because then they would get high testosterone, and that's not good. And so eventually I found a doctor that would prescribe me the shot, the enanthate, the cypionate, which is the oil. And so it was a dangerous, slippery slope for me that led me back into my relapse. And there's this constant theme with me of tricking doctors and manipulating doctors, lying to doctors to get the drugs that I want, and ultimately that led me back out to smoking meth, snorting coke, taking meth pills in the form of Adderall from the dark web. I got into it real deep this time, hanging out with people I didn't want to hang out with. And all started from a simple steroid, something completely different than what I was usually taking, my drug of choice, DOC, if you will. Luckily, I got back into treatment and, things are okay. But that's why today, the other day I was flirting with the idea again. And this is dangerous for me, right? Like, looking at these same websites and flirting with the idea of buying more steroids on top of, and again, I have to ask myself, like, what is this about? And it comes down to the same thing. It's the same damn thing every time. I'm not comfortable with my inside feeling. I'm not comfortable with the way I feel that I look to people. And so I need to fix it. I need to change it. And it gets me nowhere. So today I have to look to community. I have to look to friends. I have to tell people. I have to do videos like this. I have to talk about it to get it out of my head, because when it's in my head, it's a great idea. It's a great idea when it's in my head and I don't share it with anybody. It's a dangerous place to be, and I don't want to go back there. I don't want to be hanging out with those people again. I don't want to get kicked out of my house by my wife again. I don't want my parents to think I'm going to die every night. I want sobriety. I want recovery, because it's a little bit harder in some days, but it's worth it at the end. It's this idea of delayed gratification. It's putting down the thought of buying that new toy, that iPhone 15, that iPhone 16, that new toy, and saving for a house, not buying the Amazon thing and saving for a house. That's the same thing with addiction, in my opinion. I have to put down this quick fix because it never works. It never gets fixed. And I have to pick the long-term delayed gratification. I have to pick the slow, consistent, daily practices over the weight loss pill. If you're thinking about doing something and you feel like it might be a mistake, talk to somebody. Reach out for help. That saves me today.